So with this, we'd like to request the workshop participants to please proceed to Hall 3. It's Hall 3 now. We've renumbered it to avoid any confusion.
All right, guys, thanks for having me. Today we're going to be talking about actionable gamification beyond points, badges, and leaderboards. So I'm Yukai Chow, and today I'm going to be your guild leader. We're going to go through a little bit about what I think makes gamification compelling. So a quick background about myself. I've been working in gamification since 2003, so being one of the earlier people who devoted my life to this trade. I'm the partner at the Enterprise Gamification Consultancy. I'm probably most known for the framework Octalysis that I created. That was translated about 10 different languages, and which we'll dive into that in this talk and also another talk after this. And I do a lot of workshops, lectures at places like Accenture, Stanford University, Denmark Innovation Center, and this company in the UK called Leaderboarded decided that I was one of the top 3 gamification gurus in the world. Cool. So wanted to thank you for allowing me to share some of my experiences and things I've learned throughout the past 10 years. Cool. So let's start with games, right? So what are games? What do you think about when you think of a gamer? A lot of people, when they think of what is a gamer, they think about people like this, right? Little kids or guys who are single, and they don't have a job and they just play video games and they eat pizza onto their shirts, right? But the demographic actually is surprising for a lot of people. And this is pretty worldwide. The average gamer is actually 35 years old. And 68% of those gamers are over 18. And 47% of those gamers are women too, which means that there are more adult women playing games than male under 18. So this is like if you include games like Angry Birds, like Candy Crush, things like that. So before we go into gamification, I'd like to start with a small exercise, just a little brain exercise in your head. So think about one game that you enjoyed playing in the past, right? And there are different types of games, right? There's these social games, Farmville, Candy Crush, Angry Birds. There's the more hardcore games, StarCraft, WoW, Dota. But even if you're like, oh, I don't play games, I'm pretty sure at one point you enjoyed playing a traditional game like poker, golf, mahjong. I don't know what people play in India, Sudoku. But just think about that. Think about one game. And also think about what made that game fun and enjoyable. Right? Just like, hey, there's so many games out there, but some I just don't like to play and some I do. So try to figure out what makes that so appealing to you. And we'll come back to that later. So what is gamification, right? We had a definition earlier, but the quick thing is you take all the fun, exciting, motivating elements of games and you dump it into boring non-game context, things you have to do, but you don't necessarily enjoy doing. And so some people ask me, hey, do games really have that much power to motivate? And my answer is yes. And my favorite example is this, right? A lot of people say that kids these days have no work ethics, right? They can't focus, they have no discipline, they don't work hard and all that stuff, right? But when it comes to games, kids have amazing work ethics. A lot of kids wake up 3 a.m. in the morning behind their parents' back to secretly go onto a computer and log in and level up the little characters, right? And if you played, games like RPG, role-playing games, leveling up usually means that you're killing the exact same monsters at the exact same stage over and over and over again for hours. Even games like Candy Crush, right? It's pretty repetitive. It's the same motion, like, matching. Most games is about repetitive motion actions repeatedly for hours and weeks and months. So for gamers, this is fun. Some people call it grinding. Kids would be like, oh, I can't go out today because I have to go grind for another 2 hours. And it's fun and addicting for a lot of these gamers. But in the real world, we call that grunt work, right? If you are sitting there doing something monotonous, repetitive for hours and hours, that's boring. No one likes that, right? And so if games can get kids who, again, have no work ethics, no discipline, right, to wake up 3 a.m. behind their parents' back and secretly do grunt work for hours, right? And you understand why, and you harness the power, I believe that you can motivate anyone to do anything if it is well designed. So unfortunately, real life isn't that fun. It's not that engaging, addicting, right? So this is a just funny picture. Like, hey, look, reality is the worst game ever. It's just not that fun. And we understand why. It doesn't have to be that way. It's just, in reality, we always focus on things we have to do, not think about what actually engages, what makes us want to do, which makes games so popular because that's what they focus on. And just a quick view, we're not going to go through all that. Part of the reason why games and, for instance, work, this is about workplace gamification, is so different in terms of motivation is if you look at these factors, right, tasks we just talked about, games are repetitive, but they're fun. Work, it's repetitive but dull. And feedback, right? In work game, you're constantly seeing feedback. You do this, immediately see, oh, I did bad, I did good. Oh, I need a better strategy, right? In the workplace, sometimes, every year you get some kind of progress report back, and you're like, oh, okay, I get it, kind of. And in the game, the goal is always clear. You know exactly what you're supposed to do. You need to go to this place, talk to this character, or match candies together. But in workplace, sometimes very contradictory and vague. Right, so there's a lot of these things. I'm not going to go through all of them, but you just kind of understand that there's a big difference, a big gap between what work provides you and what games provide you. Right? Some of the interesting things like failure. Right? In the game, most people expect failure. Right? You know that you're probably going to die or lose a game when you're playing it. Right? At one point. Right? But that's fine. You expect it. You brag about it. You laugh about it. You learn from it. But in the corporate environment, it's usually forbidden. It's punished. You don't want to talk about it. And whenever you forbid, failing, that wipes out innovation, right? No one wants to try anything new if failing is the worst thing ever in the world. Also, things like promotion, right? In a game, your promotion or status is based on meritocracy. It's based on how well you do it. I've seen games where 30, 40-year-old people are listening to their guild leader, which is like a 13-year-old kid, right? But he knows everything. He can do everything so well. So he's like, hey, you go there, you do this magic, you do it. They're like, yes, 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 They understand that. But in the workplace, it's something where we call kissocracy. I can't even pronounce it correctly, right? Sometimes you see, this guy is at a high position, not because he's the best at doing what he does. He's the best at, doing his politics, making people like him, and then, other people do their work and he takes the credit. Not saying all people are like that. You just see that a lot these days. Just things like that. And so no wonder why people don't like to go to work, right? They like to go to work and they're just like falling asleep, and they go home and they play games. And some bad employees go to work and they play games there too. So I believe the real term for gamification is called human-focused design, as opposed to function-focused design. So this is a design that optimizes for people's motivation. Most systems out there are function-focused. So it really assumes people in the system will do their work, and it optimizes for efficiency, for productivity, right? This is like a factory. When you're working on a factory, you just kind of assume the workers will do their work, right? So you're just like, okay, now let's see how can we maximize our production, right? Maximize revenue. But human-focused design is a system that remembers people in the system have feelings, they have motivations, they have insecurities, they have reasons why they do or do not want to do something. And it optimizes for that. So that's kind of like a theme park. You make it really, really fun, and then you can automatically predict that people will want to line up for hours and hours just so they can enjoy the experience. And the reason why we call it gamification is because the gaming industry is the first industry to master human-focused design, right? Because games have no other purpose than to entertain people, right? Sure, there's like some purpose, like saving the world or killing the dragon, and sometimes saving the dragon, but those are all just made-up excuses to entertain, please the human in the system. So because games have spent decades or even centuries, depending on how you qualify a game, to master what engages people, how to get people to do things when there's no real reason to do it, now we're learning from games, and that's what we call gamification. So just to make it less abstract, let's go through a few examples in gamification. And there's some term people talk about, what are serious games and all that stuff. From my point of view, as long as you make something more like a game, to make game like gamify, that qualifies. So I feel like if you spend a lot of time learning about what makes a game interesting, and you bring that to other applications, you got it. So one of my favorite examples, it's a pretty well-known one, is Foldit. And this is about science research. So the scientists were trying to figure out a protein virus structure for AIDS viruses, right? So it's trying to solve for AIDS. And the top PhDs in the world couldn't figure this out for 15 years. So they're like, why not create a game about it? Let's create a game called Foldit. So this is a protein folding game where and it's online, and people can just decide to fold these structures and do things like maximize surface area, whatnot. And then what happened was that within 10 days, some guy online solved it. Not a scientist, some guy who just, hey, this is fun, let me play with it, and solved it, right? So when you talk about solving a 15-year-old problem in 10 days through a game, you see that's very, very powerful. It's actually making an impact now. When people say, oh, is this gamification a fad? It's already changing lives of people, right? Very important. SAP Community Network. So this is something worked on by my colleague Mario Herger. And so they have a community network that's trying to identify expertise. So a lot of organizations are like, oh, I'm sure someone in my company has this knowledge. Someone on this website has this knowledge, but I don't know who. It's hard to get them to volunteer that, right? And this is already a pretty popular site. It has like 2 million. It had like 2 million visitors every month. So it's not like a startup that's just like, hey, we want to try to get from 10 people to 20 people, right? So they started adding in some gamification elements into it. They had a reputation system, status building, leveling up. And what you see is that within a few weeks of adding that system, their active users increased by 13x, quite a bit, and the activity by 2,300%. So when you look at a company like SAP, like anything like 5, 8, 20% increase is already impressive, right? Let alone these are like really crazy numbers just from adding these elements. On more of a sales basis, marketing gamification. One example I talked about is Autodesk. So Autodesk makes high-quality 3D imaging software. You just design things through their software. But it's pretty expensive. A piece of software could run $2,000 to $7,000 a piece. So they're like, hey, the way to sell this is to get more people to download the free trial. And as they download the free trial, maybe they'll end up buying it. So they created a game which is pretending that, well, first of all, in order to play the game, you have to download the free trial of Autodesk. And once you downloaded it, it makes you pretend that you're traveling the world, 3 different places, and this is your passport, right? And you're solving problems. So it's like, oh, look, this water dam is breaking, has cracks, and you have to solve this problem. And of course, the way to solve it is use your Autodesk free trial software to solve it. Or this bridge is falling apart, you got to fix it, right? And so this was a pretty engaging and fun game. And what you saw is it increased their trial usage by 54%. And more importantly, which is your bottom line ROI numbers, it increased sales revenue by 29%. Again, for $1 billion company, this is very, very substantial, very, very important, right? So there's a lot of examples of gamification. I'd love to tell you all of them, but I don't have time here. So what I've done is I've put together a page that puts together about 90-plus gamification case studies, all with ROI numbers, percentage improvement. So if you guys want, you can go to bit.ly/game, capital ROI. So, and if you guys have, you can write it down, or maybe later on get the slides, you can get it. Or you can just search for it on Google. It's pretty searchable. So what I face a lot is people still say, oh, everyone's talking about gamification, but our executives, the high-level people, right, the baby boomers, they're still wondering, oh, is this really something useful? Is this create value? Isn't that a big distraction? And so I always like to refer to the Schopenhauer truth hype cycle. It's a German philosopher. He says that every truth passes through 3 stages before it recognizes. First, it is ridiculed, haha, stupid. Second is violently opposed, wait, no, that's not the way to go. And then third is regarded as self-evident. Of course that's how it is, right? And he's a pretty smart guy. So if we look at a lesson in history, right, about whether this is something big or not, many years ago, if you guys remember that time, companies were saying, duh, every organization needs a talent strategy. But this website thing, that's a fad. Where's the ROI in that? Who needs a website, right? It's a distraction to business, and I think only fad-chasing enthusiasts and conferences like these care about websites, right? But then just a few years ago, suddenly every company says, duh, every company needs a website strategy. If you don't have a website, you're not even a real business, right? But the social thing is a fad. Like, where's the ROI in that? Who needs social media, right? It's a real distraction to our employees. And again, just fad-chasing enthusiasts and conferences like these talk about social media. And what we look at now is that same thing, right? Every company is like, duh, every company needs a social strategy. If you're not social, you're irrelevant, right? But this gamification thing, I'm not sure. Is it a fad? Where's the ROI? Who needs gamification? Again, it's a distraction to our employees, and only conferences talk about it, right? So if you can see that pattern, you probably know that the next slide, if we can zoom in, if we can go in the future, is that, duh, every company needs some type of gamification or human-focused design strategy. So, and luckily for me, especially as a professional in the field, it is being picked up. So, Gartner predicts that 70% of Fortune 500 will use gamification by 2014. And I don't even need these numbers. I know because every week I get invited to speak at different places, Denmark, Germany, China, Nigeria, which I'm not going. It's not by a Nigeria prince, by the way. But one of the things is that even though they predict 70% of these companies will use gamification, they also predict that 80% of those will fail because of bad design. So why is that? Why do so many of those games fail? So I have some theories about why that is. The first one is, whenever something becomes a buzzword, whether it's social media, cloud computing, SEO, there are people who jump out, agencies, and they call themselves the expert at that. They just slap it onto their latest expertise list. And what they do is everyone focuses on what we call the PBL, so the points, badges, leaderboards. When you hire these people, they're like, okay, let's see where we can put the badges. Let's see where we can put the points, right? And this is very similar to social media. I'm just constantly referring back to that example. About 4 or 5 years ago, if you remember, at that time, if you were there, there's a lot of people, self-proclaimed social media experts, who say, they can talk about the future, right? Social media is the future, right? Everyone's a publisher. But when you actually hire them, all they know how to do is create a Facebook fan page and Twitter profile, and that's about it, right? And we all know that real social media marketing is not just creating the profile and the fan page. It's about creating value for your audience, engaging, actually being social, right? So, and I think the last cause of all this gamification efforts being wasted and failing is because people do it the wrong way. Everyone's obsessed with the fancy stuff, the game mechanics, the game elements, and what they don't focus on what we call the core drives. So let's take an example of a bad game designer. So a bad game designer could think, okay, what are the game elements I need to use? We need swords, right? Where can they go? Oh yeah, here. Monsters. Oh yeah, let's have some cows too. Oh, let's have friends who can fertilize your crop. Oh yeah, while we're at it, why don't we add some Angry Birds? Let's add some plants and some words, right? So you can see here that a game can have all the quote-unquote right elements, right game elements, but still be really stupid and boring. Just because you have these doesn't mean you're a fun game. And if you think about it, every single game in the market has game elements and game mechanics in them. But most games still are boring. Most games still suck. Most are financial losers, right? So it's actually really naive for a company to think, oh, if I just take those game elements, game mechanics that are even found in failed games and put it into my product, it'll be so successful, right? It just makes no sense at all. So, and you know, only a few well-designed games achieve the status called winning and addicting. And there's a lot of, you know, when it does become a winning game, you know about it because everyone around you is playing it, they're telling you to play it too. So let's look at the viewpoint of a good game designer. What do they think about? So a good game designer, instead of thinking about what game elements I want, they start off thinking about how do I want my users to feel, right? Do I want my users to feel inspired? Do I want them to feel proud or even scared for some horror games, right? And then after he understands that, he says, oh, okay, then what are the game elements I need to accomplish that, right? It could be swords, could be monsters, could be friends, you know, it's not for sure until you actually think through the problem. So quick summary there is good gamification does not start with game elements, but starts with our core drives. So this is where I introduced my framework Octalysis. So I created it to really help companies really engaging in gamification design better. And it's a busy chart we're going to go through in more detail. But as you can see, it's based on an octagon shape. That's why it's Octalysis. There's 8 core drives in the middle and a lot of game mechanics, game elements, techniques on the side, which we won't go into too much detail today. So yeah, when you look at this, the first thing you want to focus on is the 8 core drives. So there's 8 motivation points in the center of this Octalysis drives. And I believe that every single thing you do is motivated by one or more of these 8 core drives. There's a ninth hidden core drive called sensation, but we won't need to talk about that probably in our context here. So let's talk about these 8 core drives, right? They're very important in my framework, obviously. So the first one is epic meaning and calling. This is the concept that you're motivated because you feel like you're doing something bigger than yourself. And this is why people contribute to things like Wikipedia, right? Not to make more money, not even to upgrade your resume, but people contribute to Wikipedia because they feel like they're protecting humanity's knowledge, right? Something higher than themselves. And I remember when I was running my startup, when I was much younger, probably like 7, 8 years ago, I'm like, hey, I want to put my startup on Wikipedia. It'd be so cool. So I put it up there, right? And I put out all the description, what we do, how we're so awesome, right? And then within 3 minutes, it got flagged. Someone says, not substantial enough, flagged for removal. And then with another 2 minutes, someone says, approve, and it was gone. I'm like, who are these people? Do they have lives, right? They're just like, on Wikipedia, what's not substantial, what's not substantial? Like, I'm going to remove all the stuff, right? It's just so crazy. But because they feel like, hey, Wikipedia is the place to protect humanity's knowledge. We don't want crap out there like you guys startup. We want, we want actually important things. So they're just there constantly watching that. And that's guided by epic meaning and calling. And then there's other things like elitism, things you feel like you have to do as part of your culture. Those are all driven by this. The calling part is also very interesting. The calling part means that you're motivated because you feel like somehow you're called to do something, you're special. Like in a game, somehow there's always this big mission about, hey, you're trying to save the world, and for some reason you're the only person qualified to do it. Right, so you feel like you have to do it. And so the calling part is sometimes like, hey, sometimes when you get beginner's luck, you try out a new product, you try a new experience, and then suddenly, hey, wow, I got this amazing result when everyone's failed. Maybe I was built for this, I'm meant for this, right? And now you feel more engaged. So how to create that feeling inside of users, that's epic meaning calling. Number 2 is development accomplishment. So, and by the way, I have a talk after this, human-focused design, that really goes into a lot of detail more about how to do these things and more detail on these core drives. So if you don't remember everything or you want to dive deeper, just go to that next one. But this is a bigger overview. So development accomplishment is the feeling of leveling up, improving, achieving mastery, and that motivates people, right? And this is where most of the points, badges, leaderboards fall into. Right? It's like, oh, I'm accumulating more points, I'm getting there. And you see things like the Nike Fuel Plus, right? You're running around and you see your score increase. It motivates people. And one very important thing is the feeling of accomplishment, right? One of my favorite e-commerce gamification examples that everyone knows about, but they don't realize is gamification, is eBay, right? If you think about eBay, if you think about like a generic e-commerce site, it's not necessarily intuitive to think about a site that has competitive bidding and feedback system, a yellow star, purple star, all that stuff. But another really cool thing about eBay is that when you buy something on eBay, you didn't just buy something. You won, right? Yeah, sure, maybe you paid like 10% more than what you would have otherwise paid. But at least you beat those 10 other bastards who were bidding against you, right? I bid against him. Oh, he beat me again. I'm going to beat him. And yes, I finally beat him. I won. I got the product, right? You feel like you won. And that's the thing. That's the reason why. There's a lot of reasons on eBay through a lot of game techniques, but that's one of the key reasons why people say that eBay is addicting. I'm always thinking about it. I'm always coming back, seeing, hey, did I win or not? Am I the leading bidder now? Development accomplishment. The third one is empowerment of creativity and feedback. So this is like Lego. You give users the basic building blocks. And there's an infinite amount of ways for them to use their creativity, try different combinations, and see if they like it, come back and adjust it. And that part is very exciting and motivating, right? Google is always trying to figure out how to retain their employees, right? Because Google assumes that every person who works there either is an entrepreneur or wants to be an entrepreneur. So no one has to work at Google. So that's why Google spends a lot of energy figuring out how do we make people want to be here, right? And so they're like, okay, well, let's try 20% time, right? 20% of the time at Google, I mean, they're doing that, they're reducing those things these days. But before 20% of your time, you can work on anything you want at Google. So you have a creative idea, you're just like, I'm just going to work on it, it's cool, let's try it out. And so through this 20% time, people's like, well, I'm already utilizing my creativity, so I don't need to start my own company. It's risky, it's a lot of work, inconvenient. That's all right, I'm just going to build stuff here. Right? A lot of people go to start their own company because they feel like their company's not utilizing their real talent. It's not really challenging their creativity. Right? And at Google, there's other things like epic meaning and calling we just talked about. They always say, we do no evil, right? We organize the world's information. You're working at Google not because you want a paycheck, because you feel like you're really changing the world as one of the good guys. Right? Development accomplishment. Not every engineer can be a manager. So they they changed to 7 layers of engineering. You have your level 1 software engineer, level 2, level 3, level 4. So you feel like, hey, I'm leveling up, I'm improving every year, even though I'm not a manager yet. So yeah, so empowerment of creative feedback. When you use your creativity, it's fun and engaging. Ownership and possession. This is the core drive that says, because you feel like you own something, you want to improve it, you want to protect it, and you want to get more. So this is things like collecting, right? Collecting stamps, collecting stuff is always kind of fun. It also deals with things like virtual goods, virtual economies, avatars. If you spend a lot of customizing your avatar, you feel ownership over it, especially if you represent yourself or even your alter ego, like a chick or something. And it also deals with things that are a little abstract, or a little more abstract. Like if you spend a lot of time customizing your profile, on your Facebook or your LinkedIn, you feel more ownership because this is your profile, right? You want to improve it, you want to make it better and better. And so the key is, how do you make people want to improve these things? Finally, there's also things like if you're on a system like Amazon or using a software, and it's constantly learning about your preferences, right? You're clicking around, and it's like, oh, do you want this now? Do you want that now? It's like, yeah, that's exactly what I want. Now you feel like this program, this software is my program. It knows everything about me. So when another software company creates a similar product that's even better, you don't want to switch to the other one because that other one doesn't know anything about you. Right, but this is my little software, right? This is my Amazon account, right? And it knows me, and so I don't want to switch. That's ownership and possession. The fifth core drive is social influence and relatedness. So this is the concept of things that drive you because of what other people think, do, or say. So that deals with things like envy, mentorship, and group quest, things like that. But it also deals with things like relatedness. So relatedness, what that is things like nostalgia. If you see a product that reminds you of your childhood, right, you have a higher chance of buying the product. You're like, hey, this is cool. Or if you meet someone who's from the same hometown as you, right, there's a higher chance you want to strike up a deal with that person, assuming you live away from your hometown. Cool. Scarcity and impatience. So this is the core drive that says you want something just because you can't have it. Like if grapes are on the table, you don't care about those grapes. But if grapes were on a shelf just beyond your reach, you're always thinking about those grapes. Like, are they sweet? Can I have them? When can I have them? Right? And this is the core drive that Facebook used when it started. Right? At the beginning, Facebook says, oh, we're only for Harvard students. And every other school wants to join. And it's like, okay, well, we're only for a few Ivy League schools. Oh, now we're only for other schools. So when it opened up to UCLA, where I went to, everyone was crazy about it. Everyone wanted to join. And then when it opened up to high school students, all the college students got pissed because they're like, oh, Facebook was supposed to just be for high school or college students. And then when it opened to everyone, all the college and high school students all got pissed because Facebook was supposed to be for only college and high school kids. And you see this core drive utilized, interesting a lot in games, obviously, too, in terms of how they monetize. So sometimes you will play a game like Farmville, and you'll be like, hey, this game's kind of fun, but I will never spend real money on a stupid game like this, right? And then you play Farmville, blah, 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 and then then they dangle this mansion in front of you. Hey, get this mansion. And you're like, oh, that's kind of interesting. Let me see what I need to do to get this mansion. What? I need to do 20 more hours of farming to get this mansion. That's a lot of farming, right? Oh, but wait. I just have to spend $5, and I can get this mansion right now. $5 to save 20 hours of my time. I mean, exchange rate's different, so maybe 5 rupees, right? 20 hours of my time, that's a no-brainer, right? So now you're no longer spending money, $5, 5 rupees, whatever it is, to buy some pixels on your screen. You're spending money to save your time, which is valuable. And so again, that's how they monetize a lot, through the scarcity. They say, hey, here's what you want, and here's a narrow path that requires 100 hours of your time, or you can pay. And a lot of people end up paying. Some people do both. Dropbox, right? Dropbox says, hey, you can either invite all your friends to Dropbox and get more space, or you can pay right now. And what happens is what people do is they start off inviting some friends, and they're like, I need a lot of space, and inviting friends is a lot of work. I might as well buy it, so that's what I did anyway, and that's why they make billions of dollars. Another thing that games do, I can't look down, is through this core drive, is they do something called that blocks people from playing. In the old days in the gaming space, a successful game makes a player play for 5, 8, 10 hours, right? Just keep playing and playing and playing. Nowadays, when you look at mobile social games, they say, no, you can play for 1 hour, and then you have to stop because your energy ran out. You need to recharge your health, or you need to wait for your crops to harvest. You have to come back 8 hours later, right? And some people, like my moms maybe, they're like, oh, then this game is good. It puts a stop on how much you can play. They're a very ethical company, right? But what happens here is because they put you a stop, because you cannot play anymore, they're forced to stop, you're constantly thinking about it. So people would log in 2 hours later, 3 hours later, 5 hours later to see if they can play anymore, even though they know as a fact it hasn't been 8 hours yet. And so that drive is just like, I want to play, right? If the game company allows them to play to their heart content, like, I play 3 hours, I'm happy. If they play 3 hours, they stop playing, and they probably don't think about the game for maybe 1 or 2 days until they want to play again. But this system of scarcity makes people constantly thinking about the game. And so that drives people, and that drives a lot of addictive behavior. The seventh core drive is unpredictability and curiosity, which is the concept that because you don't know what's going to happen next, you're always thinking about it. And this is obviously heavily used in the gambling industry, right? Even though you know you're statistically screwed by the casino, that's why they make so much money, you still want to play. You're still like, hey, maybe I can win. I don't know if I'm going to win or not. Maybe I will lose. I don't know. And that part is engaging and drives behavior, right? And also, just think in terms of campaigns, anytime you have a lottery system or sweepstakes or like an Easter egg type of thing, that's utilizing this core drive. And there's a lot of research behind this core drive. The most famous one is called Skinner box. So scientists put an animal in a box, and there's a lever in the box. And the first experiment is that whenever the animal presses the lever, food comes out. And what you'll see there is that the animal will press the lever until it's no longer hungry because it doesn't need food anymore, right? It makes sense. But when you change it to the experiment to the point where whenever you press the lever, or the animal presses the lever, food may or may not come out, and sometimes two come out. What you'll see is that the animal constantly pressing the lever, regardless if it's hungry or not, because it's just messing with its head. Oh, will it come out? Will it come out? Right? And so a lot of people who don't understand a lot of this stuff talk about, hey, look, gamification, points badge, leaderboard, that's like a Skinner box. And that's actually incorrect because those things, that's, again, core drive 2, development accomplishment. That has nothing with predictability. The Skinner box is mostly about that. You don't know what's going to happen next, so you're engaged with it. Last core drive is pretty straightforward. It's loss and avoidance. Basically, you're doing something because you want to avoid a loss. Right? It's like a lot of people go to work because they don't want to lose a paycheck, so they only work enough till they don't get a paycheck or till they don't get fired. And or sometimes coupon codes tell you, hey, if you don't use this coupon code, you're going to get fired and all that stuff. Or it's going to expire, and then you might lose it. And then like, oh, if I don't use it, I'll lose something. Pretty straightforward, understood. So those 8 core drives are arranged on an octagon shape for a reason. The left side of this octagon are the left brain core drives, things that deal with logic, calculations, and ownership. And the ones on the right side are the right brain core drive, things that deal with social, with the creativity, things like that. And there's a tendency about these core drives. On the left side, when it deals with left brain, it's not guaranteed, but there's a tendency that the left right core drives are more extrinsic. And what that means is that you're doing something to gain something, right? Development accomplishment, I'm trying to achieve a goal. Ownership, I'm trying to obtain something. Scarcity, oh, I don't have it, so I want it, right? It doesn't matter what the activity is. It could be a boring activity, but because you want to get something as a result, you do this boring activity. And this is what a lot of gamified campaigns. It's very motivating, it pushes people forward, but there's some limitations. The ones on the right side are the right brain core drives, and that deals more with intrinsic motivations. So things that you just naturally want to do, right? You don't need a reward or to get something to use your creativity. It's just fun, right? Just trying playing with Lego, playing with paint. It's just kind of fun. You don't need a reward. You don't need a reward to hang out with your friends, right? You just enjoy that time, or you don't necessarily need to get something to be in that suspense of unpredictability. Like, will I get it? Will I not get it? In fact, you usually lose money in casinos, like I said. So that's important to understand, right? You want to design things that have a balance between both, right? Like extrinsic motivations, like, hey, I can be digging crap, and every 100 crap you dig, you get like a little bonus. Like, yeah, sure, people will do it. They'll do it hard. They'll work harder. But digging crap still sucks, right? So that's the left side. The right side is making the act of digging crap more interesting, more fun. Okay, so if you guys also notice, the top of the octalysis shape, the top core drives, are also more positive, more inspiring. I call them white hat gamification techniques. So if you're always doing something because you feel like you're part of a bigger vision, you're improving yourself, you're achieving mastery, you're using your creativity, right? It feels very, very good. It feels empowering, right? Now, the ones on the bottom, I call them black hat gamification core drives. And they're still very, very powerful in motivation. But if you're always doing something because you want to avoid a loss, you can't have something, or you don't know what's going to happen next, again, you will do the desired actions. You will commit to it. But you don't. Sometimes it leaves a bad taste in your mouth. Right? So white hat gamification, you feel empowered. You feel like you're in control of yourself. Whereas black hat gamification, you feel like, hey, I don't feel that I'm in control of myself sometimes. And I believe that this is the problem that Zynga faces. So what Zynga has done over the years is they figured out, and they don't know it in that kind of framework, but they figured out how to utilize all these black hat game techniques to drive addictive behavior, right? So all their metric looks great. Every user comes on, they spend money, they come back every day, they're so addicted to our program, right? But we talk about when you're on a black hat system, users don't feel good. And when you don't feel good, in the long run, when you can leave the system, you will want to leave the system, right? Just like gambling. When you're gambling, you're like, oh, I don't want to gamble anymore, but it's just so, I'm just drawn to it. But when one day you step out, I'm no longer gambling, you feel powerful, right? And so because they really, really hone in on those black hat gamification techniques without balancing out with the white hat, they're showing stagnant results in the long run. And black hat is powerful because it also creates a sense of urgency. White hat, I can say, hey, look, go change the world. And you're like, yeah, I want to go change the world, right? It's like, but I'm going to first eat my breakfast, brush my teeth, right? And epic meaning calling motivates you, but you feel like you're in control on your own time schedule. Loss and avoid is like, hey, if you don't go out, change the world, I'm going to shoot you in the head right now. You're probably not going to be eating your breakfast and brushing your teeth. You're like, okay, sure, right? So again, black hat powerful, not long lasting, and white hat very powerful, but it takes time, but it makes people feel motivated. So it's something very important to understand. But just because it's called black hat gamification doesn't mean it's necessarily bad. Like a lot of people voluntarily put themselves in black hat gamification to, for instance, go to the gym more often or eat more carrots, eat healthier. And this is an example I like. This is an alarm clock where every time you press the snooze button, wake me up 10 minutes later, it'll destroy your money, right? And so now you're waking up because of loss and avoidance, right? The bottom one. You're waking up because you don't want to lose your money, right? But because the goal is something you want, I want to wake up. You're okay with it, right? So what people don't like is a company utilizing all this black hat stuff to make more money out of them, to do things they don't want to do, right? And again, they'll still do it because they're sucked into it, but they don't feel good. But if it's something that they agree, I want to. This is my goal too. I want to use all these techniques to help me become more disciplined, more focused. Then that's okay. So once you have that framework done, right, you understand how your users are feeling, you understand how you want them to feel. That's when you go on the outside and figure out, okay, what are the game elements I need to bring in? Maybe I should add more narrative into the system, right? Maybe I should add an avatar or collection set. Maybe I should add visual storytelling or progress bars or appointment dynamics. The whole point here is that it's never a cookie-cutter solution, right? It's always about complex design. It's about how your users feel, how you want them to feel, and how you design it. It's never going to be all of these added together, right? That's going to be a really weird experience. So once you have that framework, then you can start analyzing why different things are interesting, right? You can look at Facebook. Oh, Facebook's kind of interesting. Well, there's not a lot of epic meaning using Facebook. There's a lot of scarcity, but it does pretty well, right? You can look at Farmville. Why Farmville's engaging? Well, not a lot of unpredictability and not a lot of meaning, but everything else, pretty strong. A lot of people like to play Farmville back in the day. You can analyze games like Diablo with it. You can look at Twitter with it, right? And if you guys are interested with more of playing with the shapes of Octalysis, I also created a tool, Octalysis manipulation tool on my site, yukaicao.com/octalysis.html. Basically, you enter the numbers and it morphs the shape to what you want, and you can kind of visually, still working on the Indian food, it can visually help you see what motivates people. So that's level 1 Octalysis. That's just 5 levels. We'll only be kind of touching upon level 2 or 3, but we're going to go back to level 1 soon in this framework. And I've never talked about 4 or 5 up to this point. But once you master level 1 Octalysis, you can bring up level 2 to do level 2. So this is applying it to the 4 phases of a player's journey. So most companies, they treat their product as one product experience, which kind of makes sense, right? It's one product, so one product experience. But I think from a motivational standpoint, that's a big mistake. Because when it comes to motivation, what drives you to use a product on day 1 is very different from day 100, right? The reason why you're there is different. Even the features you see on the product is different. So we want to take that in consideration. So the 4 experience phases, and you see that in games a lot too. First is the discovery phase, which is why do you even want to try this thing out, right? It's kind of like marketing, but it's more so about motivation, right? In marketing, it's like, hey, we just want to get more signups. It's about eyeballs, sticking ads, right? But what we think here is, why do people sign up? Did they sign up just because of Core Drive 7 unpredictability curiosity? Oh, I heard about it somewhere. I don't know what it is. I read about it on TechCrunch. They might sign up, but that's not a very strong motivation, right? And they just leave after. Or is it or is it social influence? Now every company is trying to optimize for social, right? Oh, my friend said I have to join, so I'm joining, right? That's more powerful. And you can think about those things. Why would a user join? Not just about how many signups you have. Second phase is onboarding. This is how you teach users the tool to play the game, the rules, right, and all that stuff. And pretty straightforward. Scaffolding is the regular journey, right? Usually in the scaffolding phase, it's pretty much, again, like I said, repetitive tasks, things that you constantly do over and over and over again on a daily basis. So why would people want to do that? Why would people want to do this repetitive task? And finally, it's the end game, which is how do you retain your veterans, right? Because your veterans are usually your best evangelists, they're your best community managers, they're your best monetization vehicles. But the only problem is that they've been there forever. Like, they've done everything there is to do on the platform, right? So have you designed anything to motivate and engage them to stick around, to stay, right? So for each one of these phases, you can think through 8 core drives. What makes a person stay and motivate and engage towards the next one? So discovery, right? I talked about unpredictably. Most of the time when you discover, you try out something, it's unpredictably and curious. Like, oh, what is this? It's interesting, right? And like I said, social. But for instance, sometimes there's epic meaning and calling, right? So you could say, hey, let me try out kiva.org because I heard that it helps the world, right? You're doing it because you feel like you want to do something bigger than yourself. That goes with charity too, if you're not familiar with kiva.org. Or, we talked about scarcity, right? Having some exclusivity. Oh, I want to get in because I can't get in. I want to try it out because I heard it's so hard to do it, right? And that's what we talk about Facebook. Sometimes there's loss and avoidance. Oh, so if you're like a B2B enterprise software company, right? Or your clients, a lot, they use it because of loss and avoidance. Like, oh, well, my boss told me to use this product, and I don't want to lose my job, so I'm going to use the product, right? Very good at bottom line activity. These employees will use your software solution, but again, it's not the most inspiring motivation. So you really have to think about the other core drives. I don't know if you guys know this company called Keep, K-I-I-P. It's a Silicon Valley startup. They're doing pretty well. I think they raised over $20 million now. And this entire company is based on the premise of development accomplishment, core drive 2, in the discovery phase. And so what that is a more exaggerated example. It's like you could be playing a game, and the game you kill this dragon, right? And it says, ta-da-da, congratulations, you just killed this dragon. Here's a 10% coupon to your Subway, right? And so their whole premise is that you will value something more because you feel like you earned it, right? Oh, I killed the dragon, so this is my reward, and you have a higher chance of redeeming it. And yeah, usually it's not that exaggerated example. A lot of time it's like, hey, you're using a running app. You run around the labs 10 times. Yay, you hit your goal and says, hey, here's a 10% coupon for a water bottle at the convenience store close by, right? So again, that's all development accomplishment. That's like, I feel like I earned it, I accomplished it, therefore you want to move forward. We won't go into that much detail in all these phases, but I'm just giving you a taste about how all these core drives play a place in different phases. Onboarding, right? Onboarding, that's the time, again, where users are learning the rules of why am I doing this, right? So epic meaning is very important. If you have a higher meaning, higher purpose, narrative, make it exciting. That's where you want to enforce it. The other really important thing is in onboarding, you really want to make the users feel smart. That's really, really important. To many apps, when you first start an application, it has a lot of great features, but it's like you don't know what to do. All these buttons, right? Up to this point, I still don't know what 60, 70% of those Microsoft Word buttons are, right? It's just there's all these options. I have no idea, right? And same with Google+, right? Google+, yeah, sure has a lot of features, but most people aren't. There's like, oh, there's like so many things to click on. I don't know what to do, and most people feel confused, right? So when you look into a game, sure, if you look at a game like World of Warcraft, if you look at level 60 max level characters, their screen is crazy. So many buttons, things moving, all these things they're looking at. They can even barely see the character walking around because there's so much on their interface. But it never starts off like that. It always starts off clean. There's only 2 buttons you can press. Run and hit. Run and hit. Pretty simple. And there's now you've unlocked the 3rd one. Oh, okay. Now you feel smart, right? You feel you're unlocking things. And that's really important onboarding. And then you want to think about the same things with scaffolding and the same things with endgame. Why does a veteran stay? Maybe because they have higher status. Now they can moderate other people's work. They have 3 votes instead of 1 vote, right? And so they think, oh, well, if I move on to a new platform, I'm a newbie again. I don't want to be a newbie again, so I stay here, right? So have you designed anything like that? So that's level 2. And once you want level 2 and you want to, you can bring it up another level, bring it to level 3, Octalysis, which factors in different player types. Right? And over here I use Richard Bartle's 4 player types: Achievers, Explorers, Socializers, and Killers. You don't have to. They'll feel pretty good going through the onboarding stage, but on scaffolding, they lose motivation, they leave. Explorers, they want to start, but onboarding they feel confused, so they leave. Socializers, oh, the site doesn't even mention socialing, anything like that. So they don't even have a reason to start, so they don't even begin. And the killers maybe are the people who would who would start, go through onboarding, scaffolding, and they're the people who stay at the end game, maybe killing the noobs and all that stuff. So this allows you to really think through how people are feeling at each stage. So that's level 3. We usually, it takes a long time to get to level 3. Usually, just all you have to do, I want you to do if you take one thing today is think about the 8 core drives, level 1 8 core drives, and we're going to go deeper into that in the future talk. So remember I said, hey, think about a game that you liked. So what you want you to do is now think about that game and think about, okay, so what of those 8 core drives are in those games that make it engaging? And this is actually, I want to make it a little bit more interactive. So let me, so just think about what of those 8-core drives. I'm going to actually go to that bigger slide that you guys probably recognize better. Yeah. And then, so tell me, so who wants to share an example of this game and what kind of 8-core drives are there? Any hands? No? Just talk about games, right over there. Is it possible to have a mic over there? Still a water break.
Angry Birds, because of accomplishment and development.
Okay, how does it have that development accomplishment?
There are different levels, and you try to master these levels. That's what drives it.
That's right. Cool. So let's look at Angry Birds. Who has played Angry Birds before? Raise your hand. Oh, very successful company. Cool. All right, so let's kind of look through the 8-core drive in terms of Angry Birds, right? Angry Birds, yeah, some level of epic meaning calling. You're trying to help the birds, defeat the pigs, I think, who are attacking their youth or something. The pigs, I think, are somehow invading their land and they're trying to get back. So that's a little bit of epic meaning of why you're doing this. Like, it's not just I like to kill pigs, right? If the game's like these Angry Birds are just violent, vicious creatures, and you're going to help them kill these innocent pigs, you're like, oh, that's not something I want to play as much. So there's a little bit meaning. You talk about development accomplishment. That's very important, right? Like you said, it breaks down to different levels, right? It's like at level 1, level 2, it gets a little harder, and that goes back to Csikszentmihalyi's flow theory about your difficulty and your skill level has to grow together, or else it gets boring or it's too intense, right? And then there's gives you stars, right? You can beat a stage, but only 1 star, so you're like, oh, I have to go back and finish it, so 3 stars, right? So it allows you to feel development, constantly improving. You feel like you're getting better and better, and it allows you to, and you feel accomplished when you get there, and it makes it very clear if you accomplish something. Empowerment of creative feedback, right? You have a lot of control. You're like, should I go this angle, or how much? You have some control over it, and you see immediate feedback, right? You shoot it out, oh, that worked, that didn't work, right? Ownership, there's part of it is you're constantly accumulating, again, these little badges, stars, and also, it's part of your campaign, and there's sometimes a collection sets to that. Social influence, some people like to see other friends' scores, like, I have to be the best, I have to look cool. Maybe you're like, I'll just play for 1 minute, and you do it, and you're like, I have a really crappy score. I don't want my friends to see this crappy score, so they're like, okay, I gotta play again, right? That's there. Scarcity. Right. In order to play the next stages, you have to go through this one, and you have to go through all these challenges. And you only have 3 birds. You don't have 4 birds, right? That's scarcity. That's limitation. And because of that, you're like, this is fun. Because if the game is like, hey, you have 10,000 angry birds you can shoot out, just shoot out until you beat the game. That's not as fun, right? Oh, I win. Scarcity also drives accomplishment. If there's no scarcity, sometimes there's no feeling of accomplishment. Unpredictability. You never know what your new bird weapons are in the next stage. And no matter how good you are, there's a lot of unpredictability. You shoot it out, and you don't know what's going to happen, right? You're like, dude, this fell, right? Is that going to crush the pig? Oh, it did, right? It's that feeling of suspense, very engaging. Loss and avoidance, pretty simple. You don't want to lose. When you lose, the pigs make fun of you, right? You're a loser, right? So you don't want that to happen either, right? So you can see how a game like Angry Birds utilize these 8-core drives, and they really make more engaging. Cool. So that sums up the One Octa's overview. Quick background is we're Enterprise Gamification Consultancy. We work with a lot of big companies. So if you ever have questions, talk to us. And I'd like to answer questions if you guys have any. Come on, questions. Right over there.
So you guys talked about all the 8-core drives, right?
Mm-hmm.
And you mentioned also level 2 and level 3 in terms of how you look at the core drive in the context of your life cycle of the game, right? How users use it, and also different types of users. Mm-hmm. So one question I had was, when you're just looking at level 1, right, and you're probably collapsing all of that, into one kind of dimension, right? Are there certain factors, right, that you should look? I mean, instead of having all of these 8 core drives in kind of the same proportion, right? Should you focus on, let's say, the white hat, left brain more, because they're probably much more appealing rather than some of the other factors?
So good question. Like I said, it really depends on what you're trying to accomplish, right? It depends on what your goals are, and this is something we're going to talk more about in another session in terms of how to design something and build towards it. But the key premise for Octal's level 1, the huge difference is that instead of thinking about what should I put in, you think about how users feel, right? So thinking about 8 core drives is a huge step beyond what most people do. Now, when you think about what elements you want to think in, usually some people say, oh, do you need all 8 of them, or what should you do right there, right? The way usually it's better to have 1 or 2 core drives that are really, really strong compared to, instead of having like all 8 of them, but they're all kind of crappy. The thing is that if there are some core drives that have 0 on it, that means it's usually a lower hanging fruit. Like, oh, you could just do this, and there's a little more unpredictability to it. And I'm getting to more of the which quadrant you're going to be on.
Yeah, no. So it was more in terms of, like you said, right? Epic meaning is probably much more appealing, right? Than let's say loss avoidance, right? I mean, in terms of
like I said, it depends on your goal, right? Like the example I gave for when you have epic meaning, it really empowers people, but there's no urgency, right?
Yeah.
Loss and avoidance, very urgent, right? Epic meaning, it doesn't necessarily drive obsessive behavior, right? Scarcity, you're always thinking about like, I got to get back. So it depends on you as a designer of the experience, the product, your company culture, what you're trying to accomplish, right? So we're not diving into ethics, morality, what you should do. It's more what you want to do. Once you understand what you want to do, how to get there, right? And I'd say for most of the time, based on that quadrant, it's much better to try to do, white hat, right brain, right? Because it's intrinsic. So things that I call evergreen mechanics, like things that allow you to play for the longest, StarCraft, those are combinations of the right brain is like empowerment of creative feedback. Lego, right? Chess, painting, those things never grow old, right? People play for ages, and you don't have to constantly create new content. It's just there, and people play it. So that's great. And some companies say, well, we don't know how to make things interesting, make things fun, but we can obviously offer a reward at the end, and this is the lazy way, right? And so it's easy for us, so let's do it this way, right? And we don't want to change the activity. We for some reason, like there's some bureaucracy, policy, we can't change anything about the activity. All we can do is offer something at the end. And it's like, okay, well, how are we going to limit this? How are you going to control that virtual economy, right? Those are all little questions. So there's no generic. If there's one like, hey, this one's the best, do this one, then I don't need to talk about all 8 of them. I just said, hey, do this one, and you have good gamification. So it really depends on what your goals are. Question.
Yeah. Hi. Good morning. Thanks for your interesting presentation so far. So I got a quick question on your folded example.
Yes.
The thing is, how or what percentage is gamification, and which percentage on the solving of this issue was due to crowdsourcing? Because I think that the impact of crowdsourcing is way bigger to the problem than the impact of gamification here. Mm-hmm. So what is your thinking?
Yeah. So when we think about a solution like Folded, which is the science protein virus structure, crowdsourcing itself takes off because of a lot of those 8 core drives within the framework, right? So if you could have the same thing, you could have a website that just one sentence, hey, here's a problem, solve it, right? Solve it with pen or paper. And that could be crowdsourcing too. Maybe that's not as engaging. So it's just it's about how do you add more of these core drives to it, right? Crowdsourcing, a lot of times there's crowdsourcing solutions work because there's some epic meaning calling to it, right? We talked about Wikipedia, we talked about groups. If we're all coming together solving a problem because of a bigger good, that's epic meaning, that drives people, right? And some people are just drawn to the concept of crowdsourcing itself. It's like, hey, look, we believe in the power of everyone working on something and doing it free, and so, or just figuring out our own ways and see who wins, right? That part of it, that's epic meaning calling. Development accomplishment, there's obviously levels of that. If you get it, if you get the solution done, you see yourself improve. Folded, right? Folded is about, hey, now you have 3 surfaces facing out. Now you have 4, and you have 5. Oh, you failed, right? That's, again, empowerment of creativity and feedback and development accomplishment, right? So there's definitely scarcity. There's limitations, right? There's things you can't do. There's unpredictable results. So Folded is successful because whether it's crowdsourcing, whether it's a game, because crowdsourcing is a pretty gamified way to solve problems in general. It's really about how it really it put together the 8 core drive in a good way, and that's why it was engaging. That's why people actually want to play it. Because I'm sure there's a lot of other questions on the internet that says, hey, come here and solve me, and no one cares about it, right? So hopefully that answers your question.
Thanks.
Thank you. Back there.
I just want to know, good games are full of fun. So how do you create fun? Is it the scarcity driver that contributes to the fun element, which is so intrinsic to games?
How do you find, what is the last?
How do you create a fun?
How do you create a fun environment? Okay. So fun is a fuzzy word because a lot of people, it's just like the word love, right? There's different types of love, the chemical feeling of love, or I'm sacrificing my life for my family type of love. There's different types. So when it comes to fun, a lot of people just think, oh, I'm engaged to it, so it's fun, right? Some people, but I would say when something's fun, it usually more or less is more on the white hat gamification core drives and also on the right brain core drive. Like I said, the activity itself is interesting. It's engaging, right? It's not about the reward. It's the activity that's great. And it's also something that empowers you. But, it doesn't have to be that way. Sometimes people feel like, oh, this is so boring. But it's like, hey, but every time you do this boring thing, you get $1,000. It's like, oh, okay, this is so much fun, right? Fun is a fuzzy concept, so I try to not say, hey, a difference between fun and not fun. I try to say this is engaging, this is not engaging, and this is engaging that makes people feel powerful, and this is engaging that makes people don't feel they're not in control. But even gambling, right? Gambling, it's a more black hat. It's the right brain, which is important. It's fun. And people say, yeah, I know I'm going to lose money, but I had a good night, right? I hoped to win for 4 hours, and I lost. That was fun, and I'm going to come back a month later, right? So I wouldn't be so focused on exactly what's fun, how to make something fun, but it's more about how you want to engage people through different types of motivation channels. And that's why I don't too much focus on where's the fun, but it's more about why people are doing something. Yeah, and obviously all these results, they can feel like this is demoralizing, this is stupid, with these core drives too. So it just depends. More question over there?
I remember a very simple game called Tetris. There was not much of any of these 8, or maybe I didn't discover one. There was nothing like saving the world. There was nothing like sharing, no scoreboards. It was just a simple thing like fitting the blocks and making those lines. So how would you evaluate that? I mean, there was not much
Tetris, right?
stuff.
Tetris, a lot of. So Tetris is one of the earlier games, right? So there's a lot of limitation. You can't do a lot of stuff on Tetris just yet. So you can't do a lot of the social stuff, right? Because you can't really connect to your friends. So yeah, I'd say Tetris does not have much epic meaning and calling, unless the first time you play Tetris, you like beat every one stage, like, oh, I'm called to play Tetris, right? There's no social. But what it has a ton of are core drive 2 and 3, empowerment, creative feedback. You're constantly solving problems. Like, this comes here, this has to come. I'm setting this up, so later on when that stick comes, I can solve the problem. And it comes, yes, I got it, right? And that's a feeling of accomplishment. You get to stage, it moves faster and faster, right? So you feel like you're improving, you're getting more progress. You're always comparing, you still compare your scores to people, like, oh, I got 47,000 points, how about you? Oh, man, how did you get 55? That's impossible, right? There's a little bit of that. Scarcity, right? It's not just, you can use whatever blocks you want, it gives it to you. It's like, here's this shape. I don't care if you like it or not. I don't care if you can work with it. This is it. Figure out what you can do with it. Right? It's like, oh, okay. And then obviously that's unpredictability. You never know what the next shape is. Right? And so you have to kind of plan for that. And obviously, as you play for longer and longer and longer, there's loss and avoidance. Like, wow, I don't want to lose now. I don't want to lose now. Because if you lose, then first you lose your streak, and then you also kind of just stop the momentum and lost that streak. So even in an early game like Tetris, right, there are these core drives. And like I said, I believe outside of sensation, which is like eating or going on a porn site, for instance, porn site doesn't need any of the 8 core drives. Everything you do is based on one of these 8 core drives. It doesn't, like, games out of games, why, parenting, all that stuff. As long as you deal with human motivation, 8 core drives. More questions? Back there. Sorry, I guess. Over there. And I think we only have time for the last 2, right? So.
Okay. Hi, good morning. I'm Amita from HCL. I'm from the Learning and Development function. I'd like to know in these core values, how would you integrate learning and value in all of this? Games is, yes, of course, fun is one of those core drives. Mm-hmm. But if you were to use games for learning, how do you integrate that into these core drives?
Yeah. So learning is an end result. It's a function, right? I've learned something. But these core drives are about why people want to learn. How to get people to learn. And I do a lot of talks about that too, right? I believe that humans have an innate desire to want to learn. But somehow the education gets it wrong, right? When you ask kids what's fun, they say games, right? If you ask them what's work, they're like, oh, school, homework, right? Somehow it breaks, and company training program, no one likes them, most of them. And so somehow the system breaks why you want to learn. But if you look at how kids play games, they learn so much stuff. If you think about card games like Magic the Gathering or Pokemon, kids have to memorize a ton of information. There's hundreds of cards, each card has different stats. It's actually memorizing more information than the periodic table. Because every card, like, oh, I know yours is 37 defense, it counters this, that counters mine, right? This is like, this kid not only memorized every single element on the periodic table, they memorized the exact placement, the weight, and exactly how every single element interacts with every other element. That's mind-blowing, right? But if you ask them, oh, what's the third element? They're like, nitrogen? So it's not about stupidity. It's not about they can't learn. It's about what engages them. Why should they learn? Right? When I was learning math in school, I'm learning the sine, cosine. I have no idea what I'm learning that for. It's like I'm doing it for my parents. Loss and avoidance. I don't want to get in trouble. That's why I learn it. Right? It's like, this is so abstract. It's only in math class. And 10 years later, I'm like, oh, wait a second. If I want to be a scientist, if I want to create, build a helicopter or whatever, these sine and cosine, they're sound waves. These are important. Why did no one tell me that? Maybe they did. Maybe the teachers mentioned that. I was just not listening. But, there's no meaning to it. There's no meaning to learning that. Right? And the kids who learn this, maybe some kid just never paid attention to class, bad grades, but one day he became obsessed. I want to build a helicopter, right? And that's when they start researching, and that's when they're studying, to build a helicopter, I need to learn about this math, the cosine, sine signals. And these are the people who really read books, and they do it, right? So I think learning is really about an engagement problem, not a system or function problem. Yeah, and sorry, I did promise that guy over there that I answer his question, so I know we're out of time, but we'll try to make it quick. Just the guy over there. Sorry for a little overtime, but the interaction is usually pretty cool.
Thanks for accommodating me. Great talk. A very specific question about your model. I'm thinking that you could end up designing a game where you accidentally put in some aspects which put off people. So maybe you're focusing too much on loss and aversion, but you put off people on the calling bit. So in your model, you do not have a negative. You have a 0, and as you said, maybe there's a low-hanging fruit, add something to go to a 1.
So it's like, there's actually a system of anti-core drives. We don't have time to go there, but we don't need to go there. So development accomplishment, like badges, right? Badges, it can actually motivate people, but it can actually insult people too, right? If you go on a site, you click on a button, and it says, congratulations, you just earned I clicked on my first button badge. You don't feel excited. You're like, this is stupid, this is lame, right? What else is there? Like a scrolling down badge, like a click on the About Us page badge, right? You don't feel motivated. But if you did something that utilized your creativity, you solved problems, and you did all this, and then you earned a badge, you feel proud of it. It's kind of like the military, where badges came from. If you join the military and you get a badge on your chest, join the military badge, and then a day later, survived my first day in the military badge, made my first friend badge, made my 5th friend in the military badge. You're not going to be wearing these, feeling like, oh, I'm so proud of this, or you're going to be hiding, what is kindergarten, right? But if you actually risk your life for a teammate, you save their lives, and you have a badge, you feel accomplished, right? And you want to show it to as many people as possible, as long as you don't look like an asshole. So I never ask my clients, do you have badges, right? You ask, do you make people feel accomplished, right? If they don't make people feel accomplished, then it's 0. If it makes them look like an ass, then it's loss and avoid. They're doing it because they don't want to look like an ass, right? So they don't use their product. So that's something to think about. It's all, if you design it incorrectly, you can screw things up big time, because motivation also means it can demotivate people. But basically, that's something that's why a good designer has to always think about it. Cool. And I'm sorry we're out of time, but check out my next talk, which goes deeper into the framework. Thank you.